Greetings, Montana. Hello, world. It's Chris Hislop here with another session of International Careers Week. This is day 3 of an extraordinary international smorgasbord of great expertise, interesting perspectives, and experience, helping answer one of the most common questions that we hear when we visit students and classrooms around the state with ambassadors, with high-ranking military personnel, and other international experts. Students want to know, how did you get the job that you have? Students across Montana are interested in international careers, so we've had the opportunity to talk to a range of people over the past couple days. We're continuing today and tomorrow. Now, some of those people are found here in our state, in Montana, others around the United States, and still others all around the world. So it's been an interesting finding that you can engage in an international career without being outside of the United States or being outside of Montana. And so we're going to learn more about that from our guest today. Let me quickly thank the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, First Interstate Bank, Trail West Bank, QFI, High Stakes Foundation, and Longview Foundation. They help us bring this and so many more programs to you across Montana. Now, let me introduce our guest for this session. Brigitta Miranda-Freer has served as Executive Director of Montana World Trade Center since 2014 and as Director of Operations for the Montana Technology Enterprise Center since 2018. Prior to her current roles, Brigitta served as Director of Business Development for the Missoula Economic Partnership, spearheading business attraction, retention, and expansion strategies for the community, and membership manager for MWTC, counseling Montana exports on global markets. Brigitta assists Montana businesses with their international trade endeavors, routinely coordinates outbound and inbound trade events, offers comprehensive novel export education, and plays a leading role in bringing foreign direct investment into Montana. Brigitta, truly bringing the world to Montana and Montana to the world, as we say here at the World Affairs Council. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for the intro, Chris. Although you just went through my resume,
Oh.
so flew through most of my speaker prompts, but that's all right.
No, we've got so much more to learn about you and what you do. I mean, Brigitta, like I mentioned, we've been talking with a lot of different people, some people from U.S. State Department who are diplomats, some people who are humanitarian aid experts, people in the UN. And we have a very interesting smattering of people involved in the private sector. We did speak with the Director of Commerce, Scott Osterman, on day 1 to give us a little better handle on how Montana fits in the global trade. But we'd love to learn more about you, the Montana World Trade Center, and what that might mean for students interested in an international career. So over to you.
Sure. Well, I think since you brought it up, and since we're addressing an audience of students here rather than just going formally through these prompts, I think I'll start with this. Yes, you absolutely can be engaged in international things, and in this case, international business from Montana. I do think that's changed pretty dramatically over the course of the last 20, 25 years or so. And I'll tell you from my own personal experience, I was born in the East Coast, born in Pennsylvania, lived and worked in Washington, D.C., and then made my way to Montana. And my then young husband and I came to Montana, ended up in Montana just because we used to ski out west all the time, and we thought it would be very cool to live in one of those mountain towns, but just live there for a year, and then then we'll come back to our life and real profession. Because of course I thought, well, I can't do anything related to anything international, right, in Montana. And I was very pleasantly surprised, even at that time when it was sort of a little bit more nascent, to find that I was wrong. It's one of the only times in my life I've been happy to find out that I was wrong. I ended up getting my teacher certification to teach secondary Spanish, in addition to the degrees that I had, because I thought, well, I can't do international business in Montana, but ended up coming out here on a sort of a reconnaissance trip with my husband, and met the former executive director of the Montana World Trade Center at that time. His name was Arnie Sherman. And I said, oh, I guess there is an opportunity for me here. So I'll talk with you a little bit more about the day to day, but just please know that since that time, when I think options were kind of limited, whether we're talking about jobs like mine or like Chris's, there are so many small and medium-sized businesses around the state of Montana, a handful of large ones too, but so many SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, that engage in international business now. More specifically, most of them are exporting, some of them are importing and sourcing like component parts from overseas, but there are plenty of options for you if that's something that interests you. So we'll start there. I concur, Chris, lots of opportunity. Okay, so background, I already told you about my story of getting out here. Obviously, we stayed longer than a year because it's been about 25 years at this point, and time flies. I went to American University, and that is in Washington, D.C., and I had a double major in international affairs and Spanish and Latin American area studies. So I was pretty sure I was going to be a diplomat or a spy. So, and they recruit for both out of AU. And I felt I had a really good education there. I did some interviewing afterwards, and then I just started thinking, you know, I didn't even have business classes when I did my undergrad, but I just really started to gravitate more towards that. I remember my first gig, I think it was my first gig. It was my second job out of college, was with the Citizens Network of Foreign Affairs, and they used to organize business roundtables around the United States. And so I suppose it was around then that I started realizing, oh, I like this layering in this business aspect to international. And so, yeah, I after that, I had a couple other gigs and found my way to Montana. I mentioned that I met the former executive director. I ended up working for him for 6 years because my husband and I basically had this pact: whoever got a job first in whatever cool town will go there. I won, so we won. I worked for 6 years, and then I moved on to some of the other positions that Chris noted. I worked for Missoula Economic Partnership, which is an economic development organization. And then when Arnie, the former director here, was moving on, I had the opportunity to interview for this position and then move into the leadership role here. So it's kind of like come full circle. I still sometimes actually open up file cabinets and find files that I worked on when I was a 20-something. And yes, I should probably clear those out, but yeah, as all sort of nonprofit bootstrappy type entities, it's hard to get to that stuff, isn't it, Chris? So let's talk a little bit about my profession and what we do at the Trade Center. I mean, you heard Chris kind of rattle off a bunch of points there, so maybe I'll underscore some things. The World Trade Center, so Montana World Trade Center is part of the World Trade Centers Association. And this is an association of about 300 World Trade Centers in nearly 100 countries around the globe. So it's the WTCA brand and logo that has a lot of global prowess. The World Trade Centers all believe in prosperity for all through trade. That's kind of the tagline of the organization, and it's what underpins all the work that the individual World Trade Centers do. Our World Trade Center, the license for our World Trade Center is actually held by the University of Montana. And so we are located in the University of Montana in the College of Business. And we are outward facing business serving. So our work falls into three main buckets. It's basically on-call business assistance for Montana's SMEs, or small and medium-sized enterprises, that are endeavoring to grow their international trade portfolio. So it's usually like export assistance. So helping them to identify best partners overseas, or helping them to understand what the regulatory environment might look like for their product or service overseas, or even in some cases, just helping them prioritize where in the world to go with their product or service, right? So that's bucket number one, is sort of that consulting. And then bucket number two, probably not a surprise because we're housed at a university. We do a lot of trade education. So we do a lot of technical training related to doing business internationally. And we do also offer trade forums, so people can sort of understand about another country or region and how they might or might not have success doing business there. So on the trade training front, just as an example, we have, we'll do regulated export training I'm planning for in the fall. So most of the exports, like probably 90% of the exports from the United States, don't require licensing in order to send them legally outside the US, but some of them do. And you really have to know which is which, and you have to set up compliance programs within your own organization, make sure you're doing that the right way. You have to obtain licensing. So that's one example on the sort of service export side, because you can export a service. We'll talk about that. You know, we offer, so like EU General Data Protection Regulation, so EU GDPR training. And so basically this is about how you secure customer and client data, and how you have programs in place to, you know, to forget it when they request it. And, you know, so there's a lot of training that has to happen on that front. And that is particularly relevant, I think, for Montana software as a service providers. So SaaS companies, they may be based here, and even if they're at sort of an early stage of their growth and development, they're often exporting that service overseas pretty early on, and they need to have those kind of programs in place. And then the last bucket is one that is kind of a catch-all, but you know, our mission is to grow Montana's international trade and investment portfolio. So to that end, when there are gaps and we have the skill set to fill them, we try to do that. So one good example of that is the work that Montana World Trade Center has done and continues to do on bringing foreign direct investment into the state of Montana. And so let me peel back the layers of that just a little bit. So foreign direct investment means, and what we're talking about here is business attraction, where we're looking at bringing in an entity from outside the US that would like to establish a new facility. So build something new. We call that greenfield investment in the state of Montana, like a new manufacturing plant or something like that. And it also has to do with equity investment, although we're not specifically pitching different types of equity. But what happens is that Montana has a lot of startup companies, and many of them, and they're agile and they are developing new technologies, and whether we're talking about like biopharma firms or photonics and optics firms or many different others. Sometimes foreign direct investment occurs when that company from outside the United States likes what they see in terms of a startup or a smaller company. They, for example, are interested in the distribution that they already have established in the US, or they like a novel technology that's been designed by that company. So that foreign company may choose to make an investment. Anyway, so that is one example of a program that we put in place. We developed a strategy for that, and basically lots of different kinds of marketing messaging and different activities in support of bringing that into our state. I'm going to pause there for a moment because I've been talking for a long time, and I want to make sure Chris doesn't have any questions for me before I move on.
Brigitta, I've got so many questions for you, and they're coming in from the students who are watching. But
okay,
please
good.
Go ahead and maybe wrap up, and we'll go to the Q&A.
Yeah, so that's just the scope of work. And I'll tell you just really quickly how Montech, which is Montana Technology Enterprise Center, kind of fits in with what we're doing. Many World Trade Centers have real estate with them, right? They've got a large building, they house all different kinds of international companies or support service companies for those businesses, and they utilize their revenue from their successful real estate operation to help kind of support their functions that they do, like in serving business, like small businesses, because guess what? Lots of small businesses don't have a lot of money to pay for the services that they need. So it's kind of this altruistic, function to do. It's economic development to be able to offer that, but you got to offset it with revenue streams. So our engagement with Montech is that we oversee operations there, and I am overseeing future development of that site in the hopes of turning that into an innovation corridor, and also having a location, like another physical location for the World Trade Center, and a structure that can help generate some revenue, bring it back into the university, and support these kind of economic development programs like mine. I think I know there are a couple other things that I was going to talk about there. I mean, like, do you want me to address some of these prompts, Chris? The downside of your profession, or typical day in the life? What do you think?
Well, I tell you what, let's go to some Q&A, and we'll
Sure.
probably get some of that. And if we don't, we can wrap up in that way. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and kick off here with the first question, because Brigitta, you sit at a very unique place with the kind of in touch and have a network of Montana businesses that are engaged in the world, in global trade and in international trade. Can you give us just some examples of those companies? Who are they? What are they doing? Where are they located?
Yeah. So where are they located? All over the state. What are they doing? Most of the time, like I said, the types of technical assistance that we're providing is just to be that kind of on-call extension to help these small businesses figure something out. So, and I will not give you names of firms, but for example, like I'm just looking at my calendar here. Over the last 2 weeks, I've talked with a manufacturer of a tool that is used in assembly of military aircraft. I guess I will talk to you about that. So we talked about regulated exports and that kind of program that you have to have in place, given the nature of his product that can be used. It's actually a dual, it's not just for military use. So it has a commercial use and a military application. So that puts him into a bucket where he needs, oversight from certain agency versus another. So we talked about that. We talked about CE markings. I do a lot of connecting to other kind of entities in our state that I think could help some of these small businesses as they grow and expand too. So for example, in that case, Montana Manufacturing Extension Center can help these small, they can help anybody, but this small business in particular in obtaining a CE mark for their product. And that's required in the EU. Another example, and I'll give you just like 3 here, and then I'll be done. Just provided basically a consolidated list of prospective buyers for a company that makes oceanographic sensors. And we're looking at a specific market there, the Korean market. Just talked with another entrepreneur that's kind of just getting started, and this is somebody that was looking for assistance in identifying kind of trustworthy drop shippers, so manufacturers overseas that could fill her orders and then get them to customers overseas, and that's more sort of like importing, but it's not actually coming into the country. And then the last thing was kind of fun that I did just yesterday. I got a notification from one of my colleagues who was just texted and said, "Hey, I'm in Saudi Arabia. Who should I talk to while I'm here?" And his background is in venture capital, and so I was able to connect him with the executive director of the WTC in Riyadh, and then also with a couple different folks that are engaged with the ministries there. I don't know. So it runs the gamut in terms of the types of technical assistance that businesses want and need. So maybe just give you a flavor.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can forget that question about what's a usual day. I can tell from that answer, there's no such thing.
Oh man, Chris, that's just like that's a little segment of the day. This is a tiny segment of the day. And then there's the other parts of the day where you're, trying to write proposals to help you fund everything that you're doing, or you're going after sponsorship. I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, what I really like about these examples, Brigitta, is it speaks to the questions that we've been getting from students about, look, I love Montana. I want to live here, but I'm interested in the world and international, careers. And talking about these Montana companies that are engaged in global trade, one can work in any number of private sectors, companies, and still be engaged in the world. How cool is that? So thanks for that. Now I'm going to jump into some of the questions that we're receiving from our students. Question 1, has the role of the World Trade Center changed recently as Montana, specifically Bozeman, Missoula, and Great Falls, are increasingly important hubs of technology and industry?
I wouldn't say the role of the Trade Center has really changed, but I would say that what's going on in Bozeman and Missoula in particular, and all right, I'll give you Great Falls too. What's happening organically in these communities really does help us in our messaging about Montana's business case for these types of businesses establishing operations here. So go back to the foreign direct investment kind of work and messaging that we do. And if any of your students are interested, I mean, I presume, well, our website is mwtc.org. And then if you drop down our resources tab, you can find our foreign direct investment tab, so FDI. And why that's kind of cool and why I would invite all of your students to take a look at that is because we've developed, I don't know, like 10 or so industry spotlight pieces that talk about key industry drivers for Montana and key industries that are suitable for FDI. These are areas of strength for us. So you can take a look at each one of those, and they all have sort of a value proposition about what Montana has to offer on this front. So like who we are, some interesting factoids about that particular industry, and also an example of foreign direct investment in our state already in that space. I think all of them but one have an example of that on them. So the reason I am saying that is a very kind of long response to that question that was asked is we do have one. So for example, like for cloud computing, photonics and optics is a thing in our state. And if you don't know that, most of that activity is centered around Bozeman, Montana. It has to do with technology that has been developed and then spun out and commercialized from Montana State University. So, I mean, it's made our job easier in terms of providing evidence for firms that might be considering, locating in our state, that there is a legitimate business case for what's going on here. It's not just a beautiful place to live. It is an amazing place to do business as well.
Okay, thanks, Brigitta. Next question. Would you consider Montana to currently have a trade surplus or trade deficit?
I'm pretty sure we have a sizable trade deficit all the time. And if you're just looking at Montana, and I think that mostly has to do with the amount of petroleum product that we import into Montana from Canada for refining. But yeah, it's a pretty significant trade deficit. And I actually think, well, I guess it wasn't your group, but maybe it was the Chamber's event. I had a slide that showed what that deficit is, but it's always there.
I'm just going to pick up on that, Brigitta. Should we be worried about that? Is a deficit as such a bad thing?
No, it's especially not on a state basis. I mean, we are working towards increasing our exports, I think we're doing a good job of it, but we're also doing a good job. I mean, very concrete example, we're doing a good job of refining all the oil that we bring in from Canada. So we're not going to curtail that, nor can we grow our exports so dramatically that it eclipses that right now, right? So it's not a worry. It just what it is. You know who thinks that is a worry is politicians. Not even just for our state, but in general, when we're talking about the U.S. trade deficit, people like to bring that up. But really, yeah,
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. Brigitta, the students in Gardner are already thinking ahead, not unusual. Their question is, are there any internships or volunteer opportunities available through the University of Montana at the World Trade Center?
Absolutely. If you actually end up coming to UM and you would like to do an internship with us, fantastic. We do them for credit. Occasionally, we've got some funding where we can do it for pay, but I usually don't do that until after I've had a student work with me for a few months and kind of demonstrate their ability to execute. But yes, we have lots of students that work with us here. And also, one thing, Chris, for your students who are interested in engaging with internationally or globally, at least 2/3 of the year, I usually have a student or two in the office that is from another country. So for example, right now, in my office is Sunju, and she is from Korea, and she's part of a program that the South Korean government has to basically help their best and brightest get better language skills and then have the opportunity to work in a business environment in the US. So that's kind of neat too. I also do a practicum, by the way. Every fall, I teach the World Trade Center practicum. And this is basically a class that is the combination of everything I have learned over the last 25 years of not only doing my business myself, because I had a boutique import-export firm that I actually just closed down last year, but helping other businesses. So it's everything like the basics of how you fill out your export documentation for shipments. How do you get paid? How do you actually identify good distributor, importer, and distributor candidates? And how do you maintain that relationship? So lots of options for internships, and also then for to participate like in a practicum. In fact, I love it when the students do the practicum and then want to do an internship with us.
Well, very cool opportunity. Look for that, those future Grizz amongst you. Brigitta, but let me just jump onto that from your practicum course. I'm wondering if in it you might be telling students what kind of qualities, characteristics, or skills are businesses who are involved in international trade, what are they looking for? And so students can begin thinking about that now.
Well, first of all, in general, be a good communicator, be a good writer. So important to be a good writer. You need to be understood domestically before you can be understood internationally. But so I think those traits are very important. I think, practically speaking, if you do have any opportunity to become engaged, with a group like ours, it is really specific technical training then that you will have at least touched on before you go into a business. Like if you go into a business and you already know, oh, I think that we need to, like, these are the steps so that makes sense to find an importer candidate. And I know that we have to look out for some regulations. And oh, by the way, I don't know what those are, but I know where I can go for help. And by the way, I also know what programs exist in our state to help our business pay for it. That's a huge value add that you are bringing into any company. And especially if you're coming in young and you, well, at any point, if you're coming in young, you're green, they know you're green. But if you've got like this kind of specific exposure and technical expertise, I think it really sets you up to get the job and also to be really kind of more effective and hit the ground running.
Pure gold advice there, Brigitta. I'm going to wrap up with a last question here. You mentioned inbound and outbound trade missions. What are these things? What happens? How do they support our Montana international trade?
Well, I'm going to address that. And then I'm just realizing, Chris, on the last question, gosh, you guys, take another language, any other language. If you haven't taken another language, not too late. Take another language, and we've got a lot of even SaaS products that can help you do that on your own. And the reason for that is that, well, lots of reasons for that. Language is a gateway to culture, but it's also like if you know another language, then those elements of grammar and syntax of the English language are not so firmly embedded in your head that you can't think of anything else. So the earlier the better, but it's still not too late. Okay, so trade missions, Chris, and I'm watching our clock here. So basically, this is when we, or the state of Montana does this sometimes as well, but the Trade Center in the past has worked with governors and also members of our congressional delegation, and we bring businesses that have so this is an outbound trade mission, businesses that have an interest in doing business in a certain country that would like to expand their business there or initiate business in another country. We take them with us as a group physically to that country where they will have one-on-one meetings with prospective business partners, and also meetings just to make sure that they have the right context to make good business decisions, right? What drives the economy here? How do things really work in relationships with my importer, or things like that? So that's what a trade mission is. We take them, make sure they've got those sort of bespoke meetings with prospective business partners, and usually that means like an importer, distributor, or rep. Now, the inbound, and the reason, by the way, you try to engage the governor or, you know, a high-ranking government official, it's just because it adds some gravitas to your delegation, right? And when you get the invitation, and then you get the embassy on the other side involved, and those invitations go out to prospective partners or folks that you might want to invite to a reception, it means something. So real quick on the inbound side, that just means when we're welcoming inbound delegations coming from other countries that might be investigating Montana as a potential supplier, for example, for, you know, anything from, you know, like agricultural products to, you know, finished consumer goods, whatever it may be. So that's really it. And we do our job on this side then is to help make sure they have the proper context to understand what exists in Montana, right? And it also might be an FDI inbound delegation too, Chris, right? So making sure that they have full knowledge of Montana's business case, and then know that they have a partner here that can help them answer any questions that we didn't happen to touch on during their stay.
Brigitta, thanks so much. We covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the World Trade Center. We talked about international trade within and without of Montana, and also those businesses working in Montana where opportunities exist for students to engage in this international career path right here in Montana. Thank you so much, Brigitta, for your perspectives and your views. I'd like to quickly thank the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Allegiance, First Interstate Bank, Trail West Bank, QFI, High Stakes Foundation, and the Longview Foundation. Now, if you've not had enough here at the all-you-can-eat buffet of international careers this week, and I hope you haven't, we have coming up at 11:30 Michelle Ostby. She works in international advertising. So if you've been overseas eating a Twix or a Snickers bar, chances are Michelle had a hand in selling you that. A very interesting person who brings an entirely new perspective on this international career path. You won't want to miss that. She's followed by Ambassador Ted Osius at 1:15. Ambassador Osius, former U.S. ambassador to Vietnam, now heavily engaged in the regional organization ASEAN. He's going to cover, like Brigitta did, a huge range of opportunities. So if you're interested in diplomacy in Asia, he is also working for Google. You won't want to miss that for sure. And then all day tomorrow, my goodness, it's extraordinary smorgasbord-like thing going on here. So Brigitta, once again from the Montana World Trade Center, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Chris. Take
All
care.
right. Be well, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.